YouTube educational station, right? Because I do it live on Facebook, but I also turn around and I edit the whole show to go on my YouTube educational station. And for those of you who are not familiar with the YouTube educational station, you probably have about 86 videos that I've done throughout the years. My goal is 100. It really is. That's my goal. My goal is 100. And once I do 100 shows, then my intent is to combine SciSpot and the Wise View. And what will happen is the show format will focus on both of the subject matter that I actually present on the two separate platforms. So for those of you who don't know, so the Wise View speaks more about social things in terms of politics, religion, conflicts and confrontations within, you know, a certain national, international structures, things of that nature. But SciSpot has always been committed and devoted to relationships, male-female relationships, children, those things of that nature. So I'm in the process now of developing, further developing that, because, you know, the reality of it is we hear news every day. But you just don't hear news in the sense that, you know, like your voice or your mind kind of interprets it as. So, you know, I'm not a learned person in politics, but it's a lot of things that I see politically that we need to do as a people. And when I say we, I'm talking blacks. You know, what blacks need to do, you know, better in the area of politics, in the area of community building. So, but yeah, so once I get to show 100, and I'm almost there, I do 2 shows a week, so soon there will be 100 videos on my Daddy's Right Here YouTube educational station. So there's a lot of things that I'm currently working on. I'm working on looking at a publicist for my artwork, because for those of you who don't know, the artwork behind you, that's actually a poster print of one of my drawings, and this is a 24 by 36 poster. The actual drawing is like 18 by 22. So I have one behind me and I have one over here to the right, and I have a bunch of them already framed up. So I need to get a publicist. Also, I'm working on my second book, finishing up that one, Why Are You My X? And that's the YX chromosome. And it doesn't necessarily speak about X's in a sense. Like, you won't go in the book and say, oh, this, I remember her. She right about her. No, it's not even like that. But it talks about my experiences throughout the years in relationships, in marriage, and looking at myself as a person, because it always comes down to you, the person. No matter which way you look at it, it always comes down to you. It begins and ends with you. If something doesn't work for you, get out of it, because it's your decision. It's your right to have that decision. In the same way with the person who is with, you know, people have to just make decisions. You got to make decisions. So that's the book. It's near completion. It's just some things I'm fine-tuning right now, because I put the primary content in. Now I'm just putting supporting information in there, and all the information that you hear in these shows, in SciSpot, in not in the Wise View, but in SciSpot, all these shows, all the content is in the book. All these things I talk about: love, sex, intimacy, relationships, marriage, divorce, all of those things. All that information is going to be put right into this book. So pretty much that's what I'm doing now. So I'm doing the shows, but so what I do then, I can go back and I can listen to some of the shows, because I don't remember none of this stuff. This stuff is not scripted, folks. I don't have a script in front of me. I don't have a script in front of me, right? I go to different websites and I pull information off, and I direct you to go to those websites, right? But I elaborate in depth on those things, because as a professional, as a clinician, as a person who has lived a life and has had experience with raising children, with being married, with being unmarried, with being divorced, with being in relationships, I do have a lot to bring to the table. And it's a lot of things that we need to look at about ourselves that we're just not getting. We're just not getting. And that's my intent. So all this is going to be in the book, Why Are You My Ex? Also, I'm working on my second film. My second film is, well, the first one was Words from the Wise, the Fatherhood Chronicles. This is Words from the Wise, the Childhood Chronicles. And this is actually going to be a combination of animation and real life. So I'll be in it in terms of some portions of it, but I also have animated family, children. All the characters are already done. If you haven't seen the picture posted of the family, then I'm going to actually repost it so you can see it. But you can find it amongst my photos on my page, my Facebook page. So it's going to be part animation and part reality, but it's the Childhood Chronicles. So it's talking about, it's looking at parenting from the lens of the children. From the lens of the children. So yeah, so my goal this year is to work on getting me a publicist and start getting some exposure, especially for my artwork. I've been doing this whole art thing for a long time. I've carried pictures, drawings with me from 1980. Yeah, about 1980, because that's when I had moved from North Philly and moved up to Logan. And that's when I started getting involved with local entertainment, hand-painted fashion designs, graphic design, public relations and promotion of local entertainment in Philadelphia, along with my my now ex-wife. She had a production company, and we collaborated on some things, and doing some things in Philadelphia. So I was able to do like a lot of advertisement kind of stuff, flyers, design work, and all that stuff. DJ'd. I'm actually going to do another video on Why Are You My Ex, but talks about me more than anything, because listen, life is not guaranteed at any given moment, so I try to live and enjoy life the best I can in every moment. But most importantly, part of leaving a legacy behind is not just the videos, but it's also, the things that I've done abroad as well. But also you need to know who I am if you don't know, because you get little snippets here and there in some of the videos that I put out. But I want it to be done by me, that you know my life and who I am. I don't believe in saying who I was, because it's who I choose to be or not to be, which is most important. I can reach back at any given time and be that person, back from South Philly, from North Philly, from Logan. I can go back to being that dude they used to call L. I can go back to all of that at any given moment. I choose not to, because I find no value in that person anymore. And that's what this all comes down to. So when I was talking about the lyrics, the song lyrics in the first half of the show, I was talking to you about the lyrics from, we wrapped up with the Bruno Mars song, When I Was Your Man. Joe's was If I Was Your Man, and If I Could Have You Back. You look at those kind of lyrics and be like, it's really confusing. I said, okay, so what is he talking about here? What is he doing? Because it just doesn't make sense. So, and we get caught up in like this love thing, like what's love, what's true love, and love is pretty much defined in so many ways that you really don't know with certainty what the person who is professing it to you, or you're professing to, how they actually see it, right? So there's a lot of articles that I find on the phone. I'm trying to propose something up here online, and because you look at it, love, think about it, love brings you joy, and love brings you pain. But why does love bring you pain? And what kind of pain does love bring? Let's think about it for a second. What kind of love, what kind of pain does love bring? Right? So when you look at love, and you look at love from the aspect of how painful love can be, where's the pain here? Because love shouldn't hurt, right? And that's the question, right? Love shouldn't hurt. So what kind of pain are we talking about here? Are we talking about the curl up in the bed, fetal position kind of pain? Where, like, if I could put my hands around his neck, I would. Or are we talking about the absence of that person and the heartache? Are we, what kind of pain are we talking about here? Right? Because even Frankie Beverly made the song, and I should have pulled that up as well, Joy and Pain. Right? You know, you just kind of look at, you kind of look at, you know, when you look at love and you look at the struggle that happens in a relationship when you talk about pain, the pain oftentimes felt in most relationships has to do with the struggle within you being with that other person's struggles. Right? Because I was talking about before the break, I was talking about, could you live with you? And I listen, you would have to be narcissistic to sit down and say that you could have a successful life with yourself. You really could. Right? You would have to be narcissistic to say, oh no, I could live with myself. If you say that, then that's part of the problem in your current relationship. Because you want somebody to be like you. You want somebody to do like you. Right? So what you want is somebody to do things just the way you do them. And if that's what you want, then you're not seeking to be in a relationship with anyone. You are seeking to be single. You have to understand this. If you want somebody who is just like you, you don't belong in a relationship, a marriage, with another person. Right? Because there are different levels of relationships. I talked about the sexual relationship, right? I talked about the relationship. When we talked about intimacy, we just talked about the intellectual relationship, right? But you have to define to that other person. Well, first you have to define it to yourself, within yourself, as to what kind of relationship you want with that person. But then you have to have the conversation with that person as well. But then you have to remember to tell them, but I'm really looking for somebody just like me. I want somebody just like me. Right? Because that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is you want somebody just like you. And there's a difference between wanting somebody to be and do things like you than you having challenges in an environment saying, hey, I like it this way, you like it that way, let's compromise. Right? And you don't have to say let's compromise. You don't have to say that. It should be, it should be, let me say this again, it should be implied that if you and I are together as husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend, whatever it is you call yourself, if we are occupying the same space, that means if we live together, that means that there has to be some compromise. There has to be some compromise. And I've said this before, there are things that we each do in relationships that another person may not care for. That shouldn't be a dividing factor. What becomes a dividing factor are usually things that have nothing to do with love, but has everything to do with the fact that you want to live with you and not me. I want you to understand that. So you have to look at it. When you talk about wanting someone just like you, right? We're not talking about values and principles. We're looking at the fact that doing things the same way I do. The same way I do things, the same way I deal with things. If I'm an avoidant person, if I don't like to confront things that happen, and I want to just, push things under the rug, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem. Where's the resolve there? You want somebody who somewhat complements you, right? Because I need to be able to have balance within my own life. And when we go back to, when we go back to the beginning, because I always bring this back up, right? Before Eve, what did Adam do? When Eve came, what did Adam do? What happened? What happened there? Right? How were those things dealt with? Because obviously there were differences. We don't do too well with differences. We don't do too well with differences. So when we start looking at, I was talking about in the lyrics, when we start looking at pain in relationships, painful relationships, what makes it painful in the relationship? Right? What makes it painful? And we're not looking, if you bypass the lyrics, right, all the fluff that was in those two songs, those three songs that I mentioned, you looked at very clearly, Joe said that he took her through hell. But he took her through hell, and for whatever length of time that the relationship went on, right, why did she allow herself to be taken through that hell? Now, he defined it as being hell. It didn't say in there what she defined it as being. But there is an implication that she remained in the relationship while he took her through hell. And where was the breaking point for her? Where was the breaking point for her? Somewhere along the line she got fed up. But obviously, when you're taking somebody through some challenges, it has to be some level of discussion. Even if it's not a back and forth discussion, you make an effort to talk about something. The other person may not be be able to articulate their feelings about certain things. That person may not be talkative, so it may have been brought up. How she dealt with it was a whole different story. But I'm sure anybody's not going to allow somebody to just beat up on without saying at least stop. So there had to be some dialogue that was had. But he continued. He continued. In spite of whatever efforts were put forth, he continued. So the question is, why did she continue to allow it? What was the breaking point for her? Right? And was this love? Was this the love that she wanted? Was this the love that he had to offer? How do you know? So you need to be able to know for yourself. You need to be able to know for yourself what love looks like, and you have to define that to the other person. You have to define that to the other person. I'm a person who is very orderly, very structured. Right? Now, if I put that upon my wife, how is that going to fare for her? How is that going to fare for her? Obviously, I would have some qualms about some of the things that she does that's not structured. How do you pursue that conversation, right, with your partner? When there's things that you like doing in a particular way, how do you pursue that? Do you get angry every time they do it? Is getting angry bringing resolve to the situation? Is getting angry part of how you resolve conflict? Whether that's not going to work there. So where's the love in that? So what do you do in the name of love? Is that painful? Is that the pain we're talking about? Sometimes there's joy and sometimes there's pain in reference to love. How does that play out in your relationship? Sometimes people just don't want to compromise, and they go on and on and on and on about the same exact thing. And for me, it's a matter of if it's not something that affects us and the love that we're trying to establish, if it doesn't affect the foundation of our existence as man and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend, whatever you call yourselves, right? If it doesn't affect that existence, right, then what's the point? What's the point? So because I'm orderly, because I'm structured in how I go about doing things, and because she's not, well, if something is out of order based on my perception, then I do something about it. But making her feel worse, to keep opening my mouth and saying, that's the problem, that's the problem, that's the problem, because you keep doing this and I got to keep, no, just do it. That's your preference. So you do it. You fix it. You straighten it up. Right? Huffing and puffing and walking around, smacking your lips and stomping your feet, and yelling superlatives and all that, that's just downright disrespectful. If that's what you represent, if that's who you are, then you turn around and you do something about it. You do something about it. Right? And you kind of, I remember, I was thinking back to the movie, what is that? That movie with the Tyler Perry's movie, Why Did We Get Married? You look at the couples and the different couples, and you look at each one of them was totally different. You know, you had the bougie ones, you had the ghetto ones, you had the ones who, you know, didn't disclose things to everybody and kind of kept things to themselves and kind of took care of everybody else. You know, you had the different couples, right? And you look at those different things, and you know, you see the real ghetto one, man, she just irritated the hell out of me, and many of us she irritated the hell out of. But they were together. They went through their struggles. They were okay with that high conflict kind of relationship. Everybody's not okay with that. So when you see those kind of couples, and you be like, yo, man, listen, but that's not your flavor then. That's not your flavor. Right? Baskin Robbins, I think, started off with about 6 flavors. And I think, truth be told, vanilla was the very first flavor that because it came from the bean. They started adding all these other things, so now Baskin Robbins has like, what, 32, 60 something? I mean, you have all kinds of flavors of ice cream, so it's a flavor there for everybody. But the whole thing of it is that when you see a person, right, physically, is that what you make your flavor? So if it's about what you see, right, then you're looking for eye candy, right? So now you made that your flavor, but what about the rest of the content of that person? What about the content of the person? Right? That's most important for me. Right? I want a good woman. I want a good man. What does good look like to you? What is good? And remember, you're the one who has that interpretation, not the other person. So you're interpreting what it looks like to you, and then when you get involved with the other person, you start saying, hey, well, that's not my interpretation. Because remember, it goes back to the expectations. And when you go back to the shows, the videos on my my Daddy's Right Here YouTube educational station, look at the shows on the id, the ego, and the superego. Right? So you get a better understanding of self. Because part of the problem is we often want to pick others apart. When we don't even do a self-assessment. We think we know ourselves. But when you go back and you look at the id, the ego, and superego, you're going to find how much you don't know about yourself. How much you don't know about yourself. So when you say to your partner, don't you know who I am? Now the real question is, do you know who you are? That's the real question. That's the real question. Because a lot of times we're telling somebody else about who we are, and we really don't know who we are because there's so much hidden self. There's so much hidden self. There's so much hidden self. Right? That we need to look at ourselves and see who we are. The id, the ego, and the superego. Well, when you look at the videos on that, when you look at that and you research that, then you learn about yourself. Problem is we've been defining ourselves and been being defined by others along the way. Therefore, by the time we enter into a relationship with somebody else, it's like we've been cut and pasted throughout the years of our life. And sometimes, you know, when you cut and paste, if anybody knows about cutting and pasting, I always see it in the clinical documentation, like you somewhere along the line, you're reading by Mr. Jones, and then by the time you get into the assessment, you got Mr. Smith. But wait a minute, what's this? Well, where did Mr. Smith come from? Well, because you've been cut and paste. So you forgot to take out Smith, and you meant to put in Jones, but now it's Mr. Jones and Mr. Smith. Well, it's like that in real life, right? Because everything that you absorb in life, everything that you internalize in life, comes from all over your life, everywhere you've ever been, everybody you've ever interacted with. You've taken things and you've cut and pasted and you put it all inside of you, and then you look up and you really don't have a clear identity as to who you are because you haven't done research on who you are. You've been just taking everything else and you've internalized everything from everybody. So it's like, in a sense, and I don't mean no disrespect to anybody, it's like we create our own Frankenstein monster. Because that's in essence what we're doing. Right? And that's when you talk about, see, when you hear the term jihad, you know, here in America, right? And you hear all these different interpretations. It's the war that goes on within the self. See, when you look at the id, the ego, and the superego represents that aspect of morality. right? That is constantly compromised. It's constantly compromised. So because you take on a particular religion, you take on a particular thing, you start looking at yourself from a whole different light. You look at yourself through a whole different light. You're trying to ascribe, you're trying to, adhere to the prescriptions, right, of your religion. You're trying to adhere to that. But then you're also looking at all the things that go on outside in the world. Then you also look at your idea of life. Then you look at the ideals, which is the prescription, the things I talked about in religion, the ideal way of living. And you have all these things, and then you have Miss Mary, you have Mr. John, you have the coach, you have your employer, you have your children, you have your partner, you got all these things, and all these things are inside of you. So being able to stay the course of learning about yourself is difficult. Because every time you're interacting with somebody else, you are deviating from your course, because now you're trying to learn about somebody else. And as you're learning about that other person, you're looking at that other person and you're defining them. But you're defining them inside of yourself, and then you have these expectations that you've developed for them, unbeknownst to them. And then you're still stuck, because you still don't know who you are. And then when you find yourself outside of that relationship, then you'd be like Joe again, well, if I was your man, or, you want him to break your heart, you want him to break her heart, so she can be back with you, if I can have you back. Like, well, wait, where's the rationale there? You had her. You already said if you were a man, you would do these things, and you still took her through hell. So you took her through hell. Now she's with him, and now you want him to break her heart. You want him to make the biggest mistake, the unforgivable, to make your heart break, and I can have you back. Well, wait a minute. You had me and didn't do what you were supposed to. Why would you think that you could have me back? Just listen to the lyrics of the song, right? I want you to listen to both of Joe's songs. If I Was Your Man, and what was the other one? If I Could Have You Back, right? You listen to those songs. Then you listen to the Bruno Mars song, When I Was Your Man, right? Just listen to those lyrics, just 3 songs. And I want you to look at those things, and I want you to look at your own current relationships, right? And I want you to look at them in totality. But I want you to look most importantly at expectations. Your expectations. I want you to, matter of fact, before you even go there, I want you to define love first. Right? Define love first. And then I want you to look at your partner. And I want you to ask yourself, right? Does that person fall within the realm of what you have defined as love? Or did you fall prey to the id, right, and got what you wanted because you want what you want and you wanted it now, and then you took advantage of yourself and put yourself in a compromising situation with a person you really don't want to be with. But now all in the name of love, you stay. And how long do you think it's going to last? See, so the complicatedness of self is what stands in the way of successful relationships. So when I titled this show, Sex, Love, Intimacy, Know and O, the difference, there is a difference. And oftentimes what we do is we take all of this and we put it all together. We try to integrate what we think is love. We think it's love, but it's lacking so much. And for me, right, love is defined as to how I define it. For some, love is just feeling safe. That's just one component for me. Right? Because there's a whole lot more that goes along with that. But for some, they stop at sex. And that becomes their love.